What's going on, guys? Welcome back to A&E Podcast.
Let's get right into the very beneficial.
Well, like something like that.
Good. See, and it's clear.
And you're spilling it all over this
Cans are hard to Alright, ready?
Because I was just like, oh, look at them. Good for them.
What's your favorite or best performance? Who would you say are your favorites personally? Who is your favorite person to call? And also, if there's a difference, who's your favorite person to watch live? If it's not the same thing, what was your favorite call there?
Definitely my favorite so far. This is my favorite performance.
Welcome back to another episode of A&E. I'm Tom Luthner. I want to start off by apologizing for the video quality. My camcorder is currently not working, so I am on my MacBook. And I want to cover some NFL, some rumors, what I think is going to happen in free agency because we are about 4 days away. And I want to start off, I'm just going to cover a little bit about running backs, receivers, and quarterbacks, go more in detail about quarterbacks since it is a bigger market this year. And I want to start off with the Geno trade, which is super interesting. Seattle dumped Geno for, I think it was a 5th-round pick to Las Vegas, which is, good for them. They have some young core pieces. They have Bowers, they have Mayer, which I think they might be trading, or there were reports that they might trade them. Obviously, they have Trey Tucker, they have Jacoby Myers. Running back situation is a little iffy. I know they had Abdullah and Madison last year. But we'll see what happens. I know that the trade was interesting just because they were offered Max Crosby for DK, a pick, and Geno, and they said no. But let's jump into Aaron Rodgers. We're gonna talk about the free agents right now, and I want to jump into Aaron Rodgers because after the Geno trade, reports came out saying that Las Vegas actually wasn't interested in Rodgers. Meanwhile, that was a focal point in the entire conversations of the offseason prior to the trade, which I think is interesting. Maybe they'd be able to bring Adams back with them. I know Max Crosby said that he was trying to recruit Rodgers. They did pay Max Crosby, which I understand that maybe you don't want to trade for him because of the contract, and you could trade for other guys like Hendrickson, pick up Joey Bosa, who was just recently cut. But I think that it's interesting that they had no interest in Rodgers, being that they need a quarterback, and Geno was fine last year. Top 5 in passing yards, but he threw the ball to his team and the other team a little bit too much. And I know that for Rodgers, a dark horse would be Minnesota, which I think is hysterical. They actually do have a lot of good options. As a Packers fan, I'm not too happy about him doing that. Following Brett Favre would be funny, though, seeing the exact same steps that Favre took. What I think is interesting, though, is the Giants are showing a lot of interest in Rodgers. And I think that could be amazing for the Giants for a year. I know that a lot of Giants fans don't like it because it means that you pass on a quarterback in this draft. Actually, SNY insider Connor Hughes and Connor Rogers were speaking about it. They don't believe that any quarterback this year is that good of a quarterback. They're just going to be taking so high in the draft simply because of their position, which makes a lot of sense. You look at a guy like Shador, whose draft stock actually just dropped like crazy, who is probably not as talented as maybe the top 3 to 4 quarterbacks in last year's draft. Cam Ward seems very talented, but who knows if he would even go top 3 quarterbacks taken in last year's draft with Daniels, Nix, and Caleb Williams. Maybe he goes over May, but does he go over Bo Nix? Does he go over Caleb? Does he go over Jaden? We don't know, and I would probably say no. But what I think is interesting with the Giants is if they get him, first of all, you're giving Neighbors one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. I know he's old and he didn't look great on the Jets, but if you look at his stats, he wasn't terrible. Maybe he had a slow first start coming off an Achilles injury, the oldest quarterback in the NFL, but he ended the season pretty well. Prior to Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson had the most receptions in the entire NFL. I know that people thought that he seemed flustered, but Rodgers had no O-line to defend him. If the Giants are able to go out and find capable offensive linemen, if they bring in one more receiver or sign Slayton back, which we'll get to later, and they have Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, Theo Johnson's a good tight end. You have a good running back with Tracy. Maybe you go out and get another running back as well. You beef up that offensive line. Your defense looks good. That could work. Again, I say maybe a 1-year contract, put him on an option. You try to draft Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter in the draft, and you know what? Maybe you go after a quarterback next year. I don't think that you trade up for the number 1 pick if you do not need to. I understand everybody wants Cam Ward, but you're probably overpaying for that pick because the Titans want somebody too. They said that they're comfortable with Will Levis, but they're also exploring veteran options if they decide to trade that pick, which is super interesting because why would they not just sit on that pick and take Cam Ward if he's that good? They may go Abdul Carter, which leads the Browns to look at, oh, you know what, maybe we'll go Cam Ward because they need a quarterback, which again we'll get to later. So I think it's interesting. I also think that it may draw attention to the Giants the same way it did with the Jets. If you look at the Jets, once they got Roger, they started bringing Tyron Smith. They brought in their linemen. They got Devontae Adams later in the year. They make the trade for they make a defensive trade and they go out and get Hassan Reddick. I know he sat out because he held out because of contracts, but they were able to make those kinds of moves. So maybe that draws the attraction to the Giants. Moving on, sticking sort of with the Jets, I want to speak a little bit about Justin Fields. I know Pittsburgh wants him back, but they're allowing him to explore the market. Um, if you look at Fields last year, he's a mobile quarterback. Maybe he doesn't have the best arm in the world, but neither does Kyler. Lamar, you could argue, doesn't. I know Lamar's passing stats look amazing, but I think that he's a better quarterback than Russell Wilson. I think he was a better quarterback last year than Russell Wilson. And even though I don't like the Bears, I think he was fine with the Bears, and I'm happy they got rid of him. I'm happy they got rid of him because DJ Moore is a 1,000-yard receiver with him. The Jets are also a team that are interested in Fields. I know that there are probably a few other teams I'm not going to mention. I'm just going to go with Pittsburgh and the Jets because we have a lot to get to. But I think that this move would be amazing for the Jets. I think that Justin Fields, with a capable offense, again, they're going to have to beef up their offensive line because last year their offensive line was terrible. But if they beef up their offensive line, they have weapons, and Fields could take that offense to the next step, which is what they need because they have a good defense already. Aaron Rodgers is great, but Aaron Rodgers couldn't get out of the pocket anymore. He's in his 40s. He's coming off an Achilles surgery. You could tell that he wasn't able to run late in the year when he had to get down the field for a quick 2 seconds left on the clock. Couldn't get down there because he couldn't run. I think that Fields would help this offense out because now you have to pay attention to your quarterback, not just throwing the ball, but he could run. Then you have guys like Braylon Allen in the backfield with Breece Hall, which is a great duo because Braylon Allen's a tank. You have Garrett Wilson. You have Malachi Corley. Again, Tyler Conklin, who knows what the Jets do in the draft? They could trade up. Maybe they take the tight end coming out of Penn State. They could be amazing offensively if they beef up their O-line and grab Justin Fields. I also think, again, I think that they need to beef up their O-line, and I think that Fields is way better than Kirk Cousins. I know that he's another option because Atlanta was speaking about waiving him, or they were speaking about a buyout or a cut or an opt-out, whatever it is. That those reports came out this morning. We've seen what the Jets are with an old quarterback at this point. Not to say Rodgers isn't good, because again, what I just said, statistically, he was fine. But we've seen what they are with an old quarterback that's not mobile. You sit in the pocket with a bad offensive line, you can't get out of the pocket, you get sacked, or you're throwing the ball downfield. Sometimes those throws end up in turnovers. Kirk wasn't that good last year. I mean, we saw it. The Falcons did relatively nothing with a great offense. So I think you just move on from the non-mobile quarterbacks. It's a mobile quarterback game. You look at Hurts, you look at Mahomes, you look at Lamar, you look at Josh Allen. Every quarterback right now that's making it, Jaden Daniels, is mobile. If you look at the AFC and NFC championship games, it was 4 mobile quarterbacks. Not to say Mahomes is only mobile because he could do everything in the world, but he can get out of the pocket if you need him to. All 4 quarterbacks in those games were mobile. So I think you look at it and you go, wow, those teams are successful. How do I become successful? Oh, I get a mobile quarterback. The next 3 quarterbacks are just, I'm going to touch up. Again, we'll get to receivers in a second. Like I just said, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Gardner Minshew, where you don't really have many options to go right now. You have Seattle, you have Cleveland, you have the Saints. Those are the only real options I would say. Gardner's going to go somewhere as a backup. I think that he's a very capable backup. I don't think that he'd be bad somewhere like Miami, where Tua's going to go down. You pick up Gardner Minshew. He's better than Tyler Huntley. He's better than Tim Boyle, who they had playing, I believe it was last year. So I think that you move on from those backups. You get Gardner Minshew, who we saw was a capable backup in Las Vegas, and you move on. I think that Kirk and the Browns were speaking last year. I know that was as soon as or at the end of this season rather. They're interested in him. They might move up. They might or they're up in the draft, so they might take a quarterback right away. Who knows? I know that they said they want to move on from Deshaun already, which is a great option. And now with Seattle, quarterback list. I mean, they have Sam Howell, but without a great quarterback. Who knows? Maybe they go for Kirk. Maybe they go for Russ. I do see Russ maybe going back to Pittsburgh if the Steelers move on from Fields, which is probably going to happen if you had to ask me. I think that Fields looks somewhere like the Jets, and I think that's great for both teams. Again, I don't see anybody really making a great move. I know Derek Carr, the Saints said they want to stick with Derek Carr. They have Rattler there, they have Hayner. I don't think either of those guys looked any like good at all, if you were to ask me. So I think maybe they bring in a vet, see what that happens, get rid of Carr, trade him maybe. or they just stick with what they have and let it ride out, which in my opinion, isn't a great option. Moving on, let's look at wide receivers. So the wide receiver market is actually pretty big this year. A lot of people just got cut. We have Adams, Godwin, Cooper, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen, Darius Slay, Elijah Moore, Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks, Mike Williams, Nelson Aguilar, who actually just had a pretty decent season. And then you have trade market guys. You have DK, you have Cooper Kupp, you have guys that could be moved. I know there were reports that if the Packers made a move, it would be with one of their young guys, which would be either Dontavion Wicks, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. So you have people that could be traded. Um, Again, I don't. DK could go back to Seattle if Darnold goes to Seattle, which I think is super interesting. I think that he is attempting to sort of get Seattle to do what he wants, which is very interesting because they just cut Lockett. They have JSN. They have Kenny Walker. I think that if you go out and you get Sam Darnold, not to say you're a contender, but you're probably better than what you were last year with Geno. Not to say Darnold's that much of a better quarterback. Geno was a turnover machine. Look, Darnold had his options in Minnesota, and they were fantastic. But if you look at Seattle, they're built sort of like Minnesota, just not as good. You have the good running back. They probably have a better running back than Aaron Jones, and I love Aaron Jones. You have Kenny Walker over Aaron Jones, more athletic. You have DK and Justin Jefferson. You have JSN and Jordan Addison. I mean, Noah Fant is not as good as Munt or Hawkinson, which maybe you look at a tight end in the draft, which who knows, or you go out and get Evan Ingram, who's a free agent right now. Um, so I think that would be interesting for DK to stay back. I think that what the asking price is for him is too high, trade wise. I think they were asking two picks, a first and a third, and a player or whatever it was, even a first and a third, and he wanted a $40 million extension, which I think is too much. I believe that he may be a top 20 receiver. I don't think that he doesn't crack my top 15 personally. I do think he's very good. He's an athletic specimen. But I think that you sort of attempt to keep him, grab a quarterback, let your offense be good, see what you can do with a guy like Darnold. And if he doesn't work out, he's a free agent anyway, unless you extend him. Looking down at the rest of the receivers, with the report that came out today with Xavier Worthy getting arrested and Rashee Rice obviously coming off an injury last year, Kelsey being old, didn't look as good as he was. I think the Chiefs keep one of the two in Hollywood or DeAndre Hopkins. I think if you look at what they've done with Mecole in the past, I know that Mecole Hardman's not this great receiver, but the speed guy, I think they go with a guy more like they're prone to go with a guy more like Hollywood, fast. Mahomes could get the ball downfield too. Those short slants or those crosses across the middle. You have Travis Kelce for them, and if not, you have Hollywood to beat them on the other side. And if Rashee Rice comes back and is as good as he was, you have a more athletic receiving core than you did last year. I think D Hop was great. Had a massive drop in the Super Bowl. Cost him a first down. I think you allow Hopkins to go find an option, and if he's willing to come back on a vet minimum, or a team wants to pay him more, then let him walk. I don't really see the market for him being that crazy, just because he is older and he looks like a shell of himself right now. Sort of reminding me of a Julio Jones, just not as bad. Devontae Adams, I would love for him to come back to Green Bay. Again, a lot of these receivers are vets, so it's going to be tough. You're probably going to see these guys going to teams that just need a wide receiver 2 or 3, or maybe they're going to bring them in as a wide receiver 1 and let the younger guys learn from them. I would love Adams to come back to Green Bay, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes wherever Rodgers goes. I know that he said the West Coast is a big factor for him because he does want to be in the West Coast. So maybe he doesn't go to Green Bay, maybe he doesn't go to the Giants if Rodgers goes there. Maybe he goes back to maybe Las Vegas. Who knows? I know that Max Crosby wanted him back. Amari Cooper, I think that unless DK gets traded to Buffalo, he will probably be back. I know they just extended Shakir. I don't see Cooper asking for a lot of money. I know 2 years ago he was amazing, but I don't see, and that was with Flacco, so I don't see him asking for too much money right now, especially coming off how bad he was with the Bills. Stephon Diggs, I don't see the market for him being crazy. I know that a team said that they're very interested in him, and I would see him as a 2 or 3 option like he was last year. But the injury plays a huge role. I mean, he's an older guy coming towards the end of his career. He had sort of a down year his last year in Buffalo. Last year he gets injured, doesn't really play great when he was playing. So who knows? Same thing with Godwin. 3 guys coming off an injury back to back to back, or sorry, 2 guys coming off an injury back to back to back, back to back, and supposedly his market is insane. I would like to see him as a wide receiver 2 in Green Bay, maybe wide receiver 3. I know that that might not be possible. He may ask for a lot of money because statistically he was one of the best receivers throughout the first 3 to 5 games of the season last year, and he had a capable quarterback throwing to him. So I do think he goes somewhere with a capable quarterback. I would be interested to see him somewhere like Carolina, maybe, where him, Leggett, and Bryce Young, who actually showed that he was pretty decent towards the end of the year. Um, all the other guys, I think Slayton may go back. I think Keenan Allen may go back. I know that Keenan Allen said that he'd be interested in going back to the Bears on a team friendly, player friendly deal. Especially with what they just did with their offensive line. They had two fantastic offensive linemen last year. Caleb Williams is the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. I think that they could be a force next year if they do land Keenan again. They have Rome already. They have DJ. Maybe the chemistry between DJ and Caleb gets a little bit better because I know that that was thrown off last year, and I think they'd be awesome. I could see Elijah Moore going to any contender on a team friendly deal where he's a wide receiver 2 or 3 because he's not bad. He is athletic. He does what you need him to do, runs his routes. Same thing with Nelson Aguilar. Um, Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks, and Mike Williams. I don't see them making that much of a difference on any team. Mike Williams, everybody thought he'd be a factor for the Jets, and he really wasn't. Same thing with when he went to Pittsburgh. He had a few catches. I know he had the game-winning catch, but nothing crazy on those guys. Moving on to running backs, and this will be very brief because I want to wrap up here. Um, the running back market is actually huge this year, which is funny because I feel like there aren't many teams that are in desperate need of a running back. And we have Aaron Jones, we have Jalen Warren, we have Najee Harris, we have Nick Chubb, we have J.K. Dobbins, we have Rico Dowdle, Raheem Mostert, Khalil Herbert, Javonte Williams, Jordan Mason, Kareem Hunt, Samaje Perine, Alexander Madison, and Ty Johnson. Those are probably the biggest names in my opinion. Um, I could see if Minnesota does make a move with a quarterback and gets a guy like Rodgers, I think that it's immediate that Jones goes back strictly because of him and Rodgers and their connection. Um, Again, I think it would be hysterical that he goes, but I think if they're sticking with JJ McCarthy, they may end up moving on from Jones and find a younger running back just because maybe you want your younger guy to develop a connection with a younger running back, and that connection could last a few years, and hopefully you guys make some runs with that team. I saw reports of the Giants being semi-interested in Najee Harris. I don't know how true that could be because of Tyrone Tracy, and Tyrone Tracy is great. I mean, listen, I think it would work. Tracy as a speed back, Najee as a power back. Najee is one of the most consistent running backs we've ever seen, 1,000-yard season every single year. I know that he's not this game-changing factor, but maybe he could be for a legitimate contender. I know the Steelers are great, but they're not a legitimate contender in my opinion. I'd be very interested to see. I know that the Bills have a James Cook. It's tough because the Ravens have Derrick Henry, but who knows? Maybe a contender goes and gets him. A lot of contenders are already set on running back, so that's what's going to be interesting to me. I would love for the Commanders. I know they have Eckler and Brian Robinson. I would love for them to bring in a top running back and see what they could do. Who knows what the Dallas Cowboys are going to do if they spend any money? I know that they're already in on Ashton Jeanty coming out of college. So again, I think the running back market. I think that Nick Chubb he's gonna go somewhere as a number 2. His career is done. With the Chargers cutting Gus Edwards, I think J.K. Dobbins is 100% going to go back because they loved how he played for them because he was amazing. Um, I think that Dowdle made a name for himself. I think Ty Johnson made a name for himself. I see Khalil Herbert going to back up DeAndre Swift again in Chicago. I think that that's going to be set because they used him in a way that he was supposed to be used. He's a massive running back. Third and short, he's going in and he's going to get into the end zone if you need him to. He's going to get those first downs for you. So I see Khalil Herbert going back. Javonte Williams, I'm not sure if the Broncos get him back. They have Estime, who it wasn't great last year. I know he got hurt a couple times, but guy out of Notre Dame who's amazing. Maybe they draft somebody. I doubt they draft another running back, but who knows how good they really could be. With how young their team is, and I think they stick with Audric Estime as their number 1 or 2 actually. Madison was a reliable second, third option running back last year, and I think he could be the same this year. Samaje Perine, I think the Chiefs move on, let a team just pick him up as the number 2. Kareem Hunt though, Kareem Hunt does this every year, and I'm so surprised teams let him walk last year. He's awesome, and he was awesome last year. He was awesome the year before that. And the fact that teams just let him walk and the Chiefs get him, he came in twice for hurt running backs, and he made a name for himself again because he's a great running back. I think that a team that needs him goes out and gets him. I know Chuba Hubbard was great for the Panthers. Panthers aren't a contending team. I think a contending team goes out and gets him because you need to win now. Again, another guy I would love to see in Green Bay as a number 2 option. I think he has made a name for himself as a number 1, and I think Jordan Mason has made a name for himself as number 1. And I think the injury might hurt him a little bit. But when McCaffrey went down, he looked just as good. I know you could say their offensive line was probably pretty good, but I think that the 49ers bring him back. I really do. I think they bring him back, and I think that the Bills bring back Ty Johnson. But that's going to do it all. That's going to do it for me today. I'll try to get to tight ends defense. I want to cover some basketball as well, especially Jokic's performance last night. But thank you guys for checking it out, and I hope to see you guys soon.